The Miller family had always wanted to adopt a child. James and Sarah, a loving couple with a 10-year-old son named Ethan, believed that every child deserved a home. When they heard about a little girl named Lily at the orphanage, they felt a strange pull toward her. The orphanage director told them that Lily was 7 years old, quiet, and different from the other children. She never spoke. No one knew why. Some believed she had gone through something terrible, but she never shared her past. When James and Sarah first met Lily, she sat on a small wooden chair in the orphanage office, her tiny hands folded neatly in her lap. Her dark brown hair was long and slightly messy, covering part of her pale face. Her big dark eyes looked up at them, but she didn't smile. She didn't speak a word. Ethan stood beside his parents, looking at the girl with curiosity. He had expected an excited little sister, someone who would talk and laugh, but Lily just stared at him. The adoption process was quick, and soon Lily was in their car, driving toward her new home. She sat silently in the back seat, her hands gripping a small old teddy bear. The bear was worn out, with one of its eyes missing and strange symbols drawn on its body. Sarah noticed it but didn't ask any questions. She thought maybe it was something important to Lily, something that made her feel safe. When they reached home, Sarah tried to make Lily comfortable. She showed her the bedroom, filled with soft blankets, toys, and books. But Lily didn't react. She just walked slowly to the window and stared outside. James tried to talk to her, telling her about the house, the big backyard, and Ethan's favorite swing. But Lily didn't respond. She only nodded slightly when asked if she was hungry. Even at the dinner table, she ate quietly, never making a sound. Ethan felt strange around his new sister. He tried to play with her, showing her his favorite toy cars and video games, but she never joined him. She just sat on the floor, hugging her teddy bear. Sometimes she watched him, her eyes following his every move, but she never spoke. It made him feel uncomfortable, like she was trying to tell him something without words. That night, Sarah and James tucked Lily into bed and kissed her goodnight. She lay still, holding her teddy bear tightly. Sarah left the door slightly open so that Lily wouldn't feel alone. Everything seemed peaceful. But at midnight, Sarah woke up suddenly. A faint sound filled the house, a whisper. It was soft, almost too quiet to hear, but it was there. She sat up in bed, listening carefully. The sound was coming from Lily's room. Slowly, Sarah got out of bed and walked toward the room. She peeked inside. Lily was lying in bed, eyes closed, her small chest rising and falling with each breath. But the whispering continued. Sarah frowned. Her heart pounded as she stepped closer. Was Lily talking in her sleep? But as she got near, the whispering stopped. The room fell silent. Lily was still asleep, her teddy bear clutched in her arms. Sarah took a deep breath and shook her head. Maybe she had imagined it. The next morning, Ethan was eating breakfast when Lily walked into the kitchen. She moved slowly, her steps light, as if she didn't want to be noticed. She sat at the table, looking at the food but not picking up her spoon. James smiled at her and pushed a plate toward her. "You can eat whatever you like, Lily," he said gently. She just stared at the food for a moment before taking small bites. Ethan watched her closely. Something about her made him nervous, though he didn't know why. It wasn't that she was mean or rude. It was just strange. The way she moved, the way she watched everything without saying a word, the way she always clung to that old teddy bear. He wondered why she never smiled, never laughed, never cried. It was like she was a shadow, just existing in their house, but never really becoming part of it. That night, Ethan woke up feeling thirsty. He got out of bed and walked to the kitchen for a glass of water. As he passed by Lily's room, he noticed the door was slightly open. A small light from the night lamp inside cast shadows on the floor. He took a step closer and peeked inside. His breath caught in his throat. Lily was awake. She sat on the bed, holding her teddy bear tightly, her head slightly tilted. But she wasn't looking at the wall, or at her toys, or even out the window. She was staring directly at the open door. At him. Ethan froze. He didn't know how long she had been watching. His heart started beating faster. "Lily," he whispered. She didn't respond. She didn't blink. She just sat there, her dark eyes locked on him. The room felt colder. He swallowed hard, feeling a strange chill run down his spine. Then, slowly, Lily lifted her small hand and pointed. Not at him, not at the door. At the window. Ethan turned his head, his stomach twisting with fear. Outside, beyond the glass, the night was dark and quiet. But something felt wrong. He couldn't see anything, but he felt it. A presence, a feeling that someone, or something, was watching them. When he turned back to Lily, she had finally looked away from him. She lowered her hand and hugged her teddy bear even tighter. Ethan stepped back, his heart racing. He didn't know what was going on with Lily. He didn't know why she was silent or what she had been through. But one thing was clear. Something was wrong. And it was just the beginning. The next morning, Ethan tried to shake off the strange feeling from the night before. Maybe he had imagined it. Maybe Lily wasn't really staring at him like that. Maybe there was nothing outside the window. He told himself it was just his mind playing tricks on him. At breakfast, Lily sat in her usual spot, silent as ever. Sarah placed a glass of milk in front of her, but Lily didn't touch it. Instead, she pushed it away, her fingers gripping the table tightly. Sarah frowned. "Do you not like milk, sweetheart?" she asked gently. Lily didn't respond. She just shook her head, her eyes fixed on the glass. It was a small thing, but Ethan noticed how her hands trembled. That day, Sarah took Lily to school for the first time. The teacher welcomed her warmly, but the other kids whispered when they saw her. A girl who didn't talk was unusual, and children always noticed things like that. Lily sat in the classroom, staring at the board, never raising her hand, never making a sound. Even when the teacher asked her a question, she just lowered her head. At lunchtime, Ethan saw her sitting alone on a bench, her teddy bear in her lap. He felt bad for her. Taking a deep breath, he walked over. "Hey," he said, sitting next to her. "School's not that bad, you know." Lily didn't look at him. She just stared at the playground, watching the other kids play. Ethan sighed. "You can talk to me, you know. I won't tell anyone." Still, no response. But then, very slowly, Lily turned her head and looked at him. Her dark eyes seemed deeper than before, as if she was trying to tell him something without words. Ethan shifted uncomfortably. "Okay," he muttered. "Fine, don't talk." That night, Ethan lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. He couldn't stop thinking about Lily. Something about her felt wrong. Not in a bad way, but in a way that made his skin crawl. She wasn't just quiet. She was different. Then he heard it. Footsteps. Soft, slow footsteps moving down the hallway. His heart started pounding. The sound was too light to be his dad, too slow to be his mom. Was it Lily? He sat up in bed, listening carefully. The footsteps stopped outside his door. Ethan held his breath. The room was completely silent. Then, the doorknob turned. His heart jumped. He quickly pulled the blanket over himself, pretending to be asleep. The door creaked open slightly. A small shadow stood in the doorway. He could feel someone watching him. His body stiffened. Minutes passed. Then the door slowly closed again. The footsteps moved away, fading down the hall. Ethan's hands were cold. He swallowed hard and forced himself to breathe. He wanted to believe it was just Lily, maybe checking on him. But deep inside, he knew something was off. The next morning, James found a strange drawing on the kitchen table. It was done in black crayon, messy and rushed. Ethan leaned in to look. It showed a little girl in a dark room. And behind her, there was a tall, shadowy figure. James frowned. "Lily, did you draw this?" Lily clutched her teddy bear tighter and shook her head. But Ethan saw something in her eyes. a flicker of fear. Later that night, Ethan woke up again. But this time, he wasn't the only one awake. Lily was standing by his bed. She wasn't moving. She wasn't blinking. And she was pointing at the window. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. Lily stood beside his bed, her small figure barely visible in the dim moonlight. Her arm was stretched out, finger pointing at the window. She didn't move. She didn't blink. Ethan swallowed hard and turned his head slowly. Outside, the night was quiet. The backyard looked empty. The trees stood still, their dark shapes barely swaying. There was nothing there, but why was Lily pointing? "Lily," he whispered. "What is it?" She didn't answer. She just lowered her hand and hugged her teddy bear tightly. Then, without a word, she turned and walked out of his room, her bare feet making no sound on the floor. Ethan sat frozen for a long time before finally lying back down. But sleep never came. The next morning, he felt exhausted. At breakfast, Sarah noticed his tired face. "Didn't sleep well?" she asked. Ethan shook his head and glanced at Lily. She sat in her usual spot, eating quietly. She looked normal, as if nothing strange had happened last night. But Ethan knew what he saw, and he couldn't stop thinking about it. Later that day, Sarah decided to clean Lily's room while she was at school. The room was neat. Lily never made a mess, but when Sarah opened her small drawer, she found something strange. Old papers, dozens of them. Each one had the same drawing. A little girl, a dark figure standing behind her. Sarah's hands trembled as she flipped through the papers. Why was Lily drawing this over and over? What did it mean? That evening, Ethan was playing in the living room when he noticed something strange. Lily was standing in the hallway, half hidden behind the wall. She was watching him. "Hey," Ethan called. "What are you doing?" She didn't respond. She just kept staring. Ethan felt a chill run down his spine. "Lily, stop that. You're being weird." Lily blinked slowly, then turned and walked away. Ethan's stomach twisted. He felt like she was trying to tell him something, but he didn't know what. That night, Sarah showed James the drawings. "I don't know what to do," she whispered. "Why is she drawing this? What is she seeing?" James frowned. "Maybe she's remembering something from her past." "But she won't talk," Sarah said. "How can we help her if she won't tell us what's wrong?" James didn't have an answer. Meanwhile, in his room, Ethan lay awake again. He kept glancing at the door, waiting, listening. Then, just past midnight, he heard it. Whispers. They were soft, almost too quiet to hear, but they were there. Coming from Lily's room. Ethan felt his heart race. He got out of bed and tiptoed toward her door. Slowly, he pushed it open. Lily was lying in bed, eyes closed, but she was whispering. Ethan's skin crawled. "Lily," he whispered. "Who are you talking to?" The whispering stopped. The room went silent. Then Lily's eyes snapped open, and she looked straight at him. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. Lily's dark eyes locked onto his, wide and unblinking. For a moment, neither of them moved. The room was deathly silent. Then, without warning, Lily sat up. Ethan stumbled back, his heart pounding. "Lily," he whispered, "who were you talking to?" She didn't answer. She just clutched her teddy bear tightly, her fingers digging into the fabric. Her breathing was slow, steady, almost unnatural. Ethan swallowed hard. He didn't know what to do. He wanted to turn and run back to his room, but something held him in place. Then Lily did something that made his skin crawl. She smiled. It was small, barely there, but it was the first time he had ever seen her smile. And it wasn't a happy smile. It was wrong. Ethan's chest tightened. He took a slow step back. "Lily, you're scaring me." Lily tilted her head, the smile fading. Then, finally, she spoke. "He's watching." Ethan froze. His stomach dropped. It was the first time he had ever heard her voice. It was soft, almost like a whisper, but clear enough to send chills down his spine. Ethan's mouth went dry. Who? Lily didn't answer. Instead, she turned her head toward the window. Ethan felt cold fear rush through his body. He didn't want to look, but he couldn't stop himself. Slowly, he turned his head. Outside, the backyard was empty. The night was still. The trees didn't move. Nothing was there. But then, the porch light flickered. Once, twice, then darkness. Ethan's breath hitched. His skin crawled. Something was wrong. Something was very, very wrong. When he turned back to Lily, she was lying down again, facing the wall, as if nothing had happened. Ethan backed out of the room and closed the door. His hands were shaking. His heart pounded so hard it hurt. He ran to his parents' room and knocked quickly. James opened the door, his face groggy. Ethan, what's wrong? Ethan hesitated. What could he even say? That Lily was whispering to someone. That she had finally spoken, and what she said made his blood run cold. That the porch light had flickered at the exact moment she pointed to the window. His throat tightened. I had a bad dream. James sighed and ruffled his hair. It's okay, bud. Go back to sleep. Ethan nodded weakly and turned away, but sleep never came. The next morning, Sarah noticed something strange. The back door was unlocked. I know I locked this last night, she muttered, checking the latch. James frowned. Maybe Ethan went outside. Ethan shook his head quickly. I didn't. Sarah looked at Lily. Sweetheart, did you open the door? Lily sat at the table, her teddy bear in her lap. She didn't answer. She didn't even look at them. But Ethan saw it, the slight tremble in her hands. She was afraid. Something had been inside. And Lily knew what it was. Ethan couldn't stop thinking about the unlocked door. His parents believed it was just a mistake. Maybe someone forgot to lock it. But he knew better. Lily knew better. That night, Ethan stayed awake, watching his bedroom door. He didn't want to hear whispers. He didn't want to see Lily standing there again. He just wanted everything to go back to normal. But deep inside, he knew that wasn't going to happen. At exactly midnight, he heard it. A creak. Not from inside the house. From outside. His chest tightened. Slowly, he turned toward his window. The backyard was dark, only lit by the moon. The trees stood still. The swing in the yard didn't move. But then, he saw it. A shape. It was tall, standing just beyond the fence, hidden in the shadows. It wasn't moving, but it was there, watching. Ethan's blood ran cold. His body froze. His heart pounded in his ears. Then, the porch light flickered again. On, off, on, off. Then, complete darkness. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. He wanted to scream, but no sound came out. He wanted to look away, but he couldn't. Then the figure moved. Slowly, toward the house. Ethan scrambled back in bed, his hands shaking. He pulled the blanket up, as if that could protect him. He squeezed his eyes shut, praying that when he opened them, it would be gone. Minutes passed. Silence filled the room. Finally, he forced himself to look. The figure was gone, but something was still wrong. His bedroom door was open. Lily stood in the doorway. Her eyes were wide. Her lips trembled. And then, in a barely audible whisper, she said two words that made Ethan's skin crawl. He's inside. Ethan's heart stopped. His body went numb. Before he could react, Lily turned and ran down the hallway. Ethan's instincts kicked in. He jumped out of bed and followed her, his feet pounding against the floor. Lily stopped in front of her room. She was staring inside, her whole body shaking. Ethan looked inside, and his stomach twisted with fear. The window was wide open. The curtains swayed, though there was no wind. And on Lily's bed, her teddy bear sat upright, facing the door. Ethan's hands turned ice cold. He grabbed Lily's wrist. "Come on," he whispered. They ran straight to their parents' room. James and Sarah woke up immediately. "What's wrong?" Sarah asked, sitting up in bed. Ethan could barely speak. "As someone's in the house," he stammered. "The window, the door." Lily saw it too. James frowned, then got out of bed and grabbed a baseball bat. "Stay here," he said firmly. He walked down the hallway, checking each room. Minutes passed. Then he came back, rubbing his forehead. "There's no one here. The doors are locked. The windows are shut." Ethan's stomach twisted. But the window in Lily's room was open. "We saw it." James shook his head. "Lily's window is locked. It hasn't been opened." Ethan turned to Lily. Her face was pale. She was clutching her bear so tightly her knuckles turned white. Sarah sighed. Maybe it was a bad dream. Ethan wanted to argue, but he knew they wouldn't believe him. James patted his shoulder. "Go back to bed, buddy. Everything is fine." But Ethan knew everything was not fine, because when he turned to Lily, she was still staring at the door. Her lips barely moved as she whispered, just for him to hear, "He's still here." Ethan couldn't sleep. His parents didn't believe him. They thought it was just a bad dream. But Lily knew the truth, and so did he. Something was inside the house. The next morning, Ethan kept close to Lily. She didn't talk, but she didn't need to. He could see the fear in her eyes. She barely ate her breakfast. She sat stiffly in her chair, clutching her teddy bear, like it was the only thing keeping her safe. Sarah noticed. "Lily, sweetheart, are you feeling okay?" Lily nodded quickly, but Ethan saw her fingers tighten around the bear's arm. Sarah sighed. "Maybe you should stay home today." Lily shook her head. This time, she looked straight at Ethan. Her eyes seemed to plead with him. Ethan understood. She didn't want to be alone in the house. At school, Ethan couldn't focus. His mind kept replaying everything from the night before. The open window, the shadow in the yard, Lily's whisper, "He's still here." By the time they got home, the sun was already setting. Sarah started cooking dinner while James worked in his study. Everything seemed normal, until Lily refused to go to her room. She stood in the hallway, staring at her bedroom door. She didn't move. She didn't blink. Ethan swallowed. "Lily?" he asked softly. She turned to him, her lips trembling. Then she lifted her teddy bear and pointed at it. Ethan frowned. "Your bear." Lily nodded. Slowly, she flipped the bear around. Ethan's breath caught. On the back of the bear, near the seam, was a long black thread. It looked wrong, as if it had been stitched by someone else. Carefully, Lily pulled at the thread. It came loose easily. And then, something small fell out. A piece of paper. Ethan's hands shook as he picked it up. The paper was old, yellowed, the edges torn. He unfolded it slowly. There were only 3 words written on it. "Do not speak." Ethan's blood ran cold. He turned to Lily, his heart pounding. "Lily, where did this come from?" Lily shook her head quickly. Her whole body trembled. She looked terrified. Then a sudden noise made them jump. A creak. Coming from upstairs. Ethan's stomach dropped. The attic. The sound came again, this time louder. Something was moving up there. Lily grabbed Ethan's arm, her fingers digging into his skin. Her breathing was fast. Panicked. She shook her head violently, as if warning him, "Don't go up there." Ethan wanted to listen. Every instinct told him to stay away. But something inside him whispered, "You have to know." Taking a deep breath, he turned toward the attic door. He was going to find out the truth. No matter what. Ethan's legs felt heavy as he stepped toward the attic door. His heart pounded so loudly he could barely hear anything else. Lily clung to his arm, shaking her head desperately. "Stay here," he whispered. She didn't let go. Her fingers dug into his sleeve. Then, another creak. This time, the noise was right above them. Ethan swallowed hard and reached for the attic ladder. Slowly, he pulled it down. The wooden steps creaked under his weight as he climbed up. The attic was dark, the air thick with dust. He hesitated before stepping inside. His hand shook as he reached for the pull chain of the light bulb. Click. Dim light filled the attic. At first, everything seemed normal. Old boxes, cobwebs, forgotten furniture. But then, a chair, right in the middle of the attic. Ethan's breath caught. Someone had been here. And something was on the chair. A teddy bear, identical to Lily's. Ethan's chest tightened. He stepped closer. His hands trembled as he picked up the bear. It felt wrong, heavy. Slowly, he turned it around. There was a black thread on the back, just like Lily's bear. His stomach twisted. He pulled at the thread. It came loose easily. Another piece of paper fell out. Ethan picked it up, his hands shaking. This one had more words. She is not the first. A chill ran down his spine. His fingers clenched the paper tightly. Then, a whisper. Soft. Close. Right behind him. Leave. Ethan spun around, his breath hitching. No one was there. But the chair. It was rocking. As if someone had just been sitting in it. Terror gripped Ethan's chest. He bolted down the attic ladder, nearly tripping in his panic. When he hit the floor, Lily grabbed his arm. He turned to her, gasping. "Lily, we have to tell Mom and Dad. Something is." Lily shook her head, her eyes wide with fear. She raised a single finger to her lips. "Do not speak." Ethan's blood turned cold. Then, downstairs, the front door creaked open. They weren't alone. Lily grabbed his hand, pulling him away. A shadow moved in the hallway. Ethan's breath caught. Lily squeezed his hand tighter. Then, for the second time ever, she whispered to him, "Run."